crank the gain a little bit for me? Beautiful. Perfect. And welcome back. This is the Northern Miner Podcast, and I'm your host, Matthew Keeble, coming to you in studio from beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. And as always, we are brought to you by the Yukon Mining Alliance. Please surf over to the Yukon Mining Alliance website and check out all the great mining and exploration activity going on in the Yukon territory. So this is our post-Thanksgiving long weekend edition, Canadian Thanksgiving. So everybody's probably maybe a notch looser on the belt buckle, a little hazy-eyed from the tryptophan, couple glasses of red wine with the family and friends. We hope you had a great long weekend, and we're going to get right back into it. I got a great episode for you this week. As always, we'll pop into Lesley's Geology Corner. This week, we'll be discussing the Ring of Fire in Ontario's James Bay lowlands. We'll talk about geological prospectivity, social issues, government infrastructure, and all that fun stuff. But first, let's get into our macro. Global markets were, let's just say, mixed to start sort of this shortened post-holiday week. European markets were essentially flat. We've seen some earlier weakness there, and the big theme, I should say, we're seeing coming out of Europe right now is sort of a rising fear of the hard Brexit, quote unquote. This has had a notable headwind on sterling. Meanwhile, the big sort of narrative we're seeing coming out of the US, and we've been talking about this, I don't know for how long now. I don't want to know. But the chance of an interest rate hike, the dollar, US dollar, rose to its strongest level in almost 11 weeks, advancing against all of its 16 major counterparts. Federal Bank of Chicago President Charles Evans said policy may well be changing soon. Future prices now signal the odds of a rate increase by December have climbed to 68% as of Monday. That's from 61% a week earlier. So we are looking at probably, I would say, at a U.S. Federal Reserve interest rate hike by the end of the year. And that's had obviously, as we mentioned, a predictable impact on gold. Also, precious metals have followed suit. Silver was trading at $17.47 per ounce at the time of recording. Meanwhile, base metals were relatively flat. Copper is trading at $2.18, almost 19 cents per pound. Oil has continued to do well off the buzz rumors of potential OPEC addressing oversupply concerns. WTI was at $50.86 per barrel at the time of recording, so we've seen a little bit of strength there. So that's pretty much where we've been going on as far as macro is concerned. Again, we're still watching, obviously, the U.S. Federal Reserve, interest rates, Brexit, sort of the same themes we've been chewing on for about, what has it been, 5 or 6 months now. So that's sort of where we're sitting as far as macro is concerned to start this short week. A couple other housekeeping items. Major sort of headline news items that have the need to be updated. One of the things we'd been watching over at the Northern Miner Bureau is Goldcorp has had its Penasquito operations essentially suspended since late September after a protest from local residents and some truck drivers and employees demanding more jobs, compensation for supposed environmental damages, and clean water concerns. We had a report come out from Reuters that said a government mediator, Julio Cesar Chavez, said Goldcorp has promised to renew contracts, expand its health services, some more infrastructure to nearby cities, and study the water and air issue to look for alleged contaminations. So we have seen that Goldcorp is back in action at Penasquito, so that's one of the things we've been watching. The other thing we have been watching is the ongoing mine audit in the Philippines, which we saw. I think it was around September 26th, 27th. That the Filipino government had again come out and said they were looking at suspending an additional 20 mines. This obviously impacted nickel prices. They've been up nearly, I think, 21% year to date. Nickel prices have, and some of the issues we've been dealing with from our end is the two miners that were named on the most recent Philippines mining audit were B2 Gold and Oceana Gold. B2 Gold operates the Masbate mine in the country, and meanwhile, Oceana Gold operates the Didipolo mine. Both companies have come out and said they do not believe their mines will be suspended, that they will be able to address any sort of government concerns about the operations. And one of the interesting things, I have spoken with Clive Johnson from B2 Gold, and I hopped on an Oceana Gold conference call. And one of the things the companies make a huge point of stressing is that the things that the Filipino government's officials are saying is that they want mines operated to the standard of, let's say, Canada and Australia. They've specifically named the countries they want mining standards that are similar to those countries. And one of the points that both B2 Gold and Oceana Gold's management have made repeatedly is that they already operate their mines to a standard in line with both Australia and Canada. So they believe that though that may have some impact on nickel operations, depending on who obviously the operator is, some of the top nickel ore producers, Nickel Asia Corp and Global Ferro-Nickel Holdings, were also named in the report. So, but for the purposes of what we're discussing here, both B2 Gold and Oceana Gold have communicated either via press release or otherwise that they believe their mines should be able to meet the conditions supplied to them by the Philippine government. So that's sort of just a quick hit on some of the news and notes around the industry and the global economic picture. But for now, let's get right into the Geology Corner. I want to get Lesley on here. We're going to talk Ring of Fire and bikinis, surprisingly. But yeah, so I'm going to run this. We'll get this kicking, and I'll join you on the flip side. And here we are again at Lesley's Geology Corner. The more you know, the more you know, keeping everyone informed on geology. So we're back again, and just as a quick intro, I was going to say we were continuing our journey across Canada, but we started with West Africa with some Archean gold, in
Ontario we started.
Exactly. And then we did some Ontario and Quebec, and now we're doing something I'm really excited about because this is something I'm actually interested in hearing about and maybe asking some questions. Is the Ring of Fire? Like the Johnny Cash song. Yes. So this is people who are in Ontario are intimately familiar with this region because there's been some a bit of chatter at the provincial government level about possibly $1 billion worth of infrastructure spending, which never really happened. And then also Cliffs Natural Resources' rather abrupt exit from Canada.
Yes, exit stage left.
Yeah, with all the chromite assets, which are now with Noront Resources. Yes. Also, we want to point out we are not in swimwear when we were talking about this.
Oh, okay. So Matt is referring to a very controversial YouTube video of KWG Resources, which had a woman in a bikini explaining about the Ontario's Ring of Fire, which of course I took a lot of personal offense to. And I was kind of half hoping that Matt was going to come to this podcast today in a bikini himself.
This would be sweet. It would be like a postmodern Foucauldian critique on sexism. It's like flip it right around. It's like if a man does it. Anyways, this is all from my postgrad stuff. But no, we're not in swimwear. Well, we might be. They don't. The listeners don't know because we are not yet a video show.
It was some lapping water.
But we don't want to mean to make light of that because that's a rather sensitive topic.
But don't even get. Yeah. But it's a really exciting topic nonetheless. Anyway. Yeah. And it's great to talk about.
Yeah, and today, we're here to talk rocks, not bikinis. So,
oh my God.
So let's dig into this because I'm really interested because it has been a hot button topic, especially in Ontario. And you had a chance to talk to Noront Resources, but before we get to their any specific projects, let's talk about the region generally.
Just the geology. Okay, so this week, Geology Corner, we're going to be jumping back 2.7 billion years and talking about liquid hot magma and how the blazes it helped form Ontario's Ring of Fire. So just a bit of a backgrounder. It's a relatively new metals district. It emerged in 2001. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Hey, it's covered in bogs. It's just
James Bay
wet.
Lowlands.
Yeah, it's James Bay Lowlands in northern Ontario. So there's no real reason why anybody had any reason to come in here and look except De Beers, who was, being the remote diamond hunter it was, went out and started probing around some magnetic anomalies looking for kimberlites and found a VMS deposit in 2001. So by 2003, 6 more were discovered, followed by a magmatic nickel copper deposit at Noront's Eagle Nest in 2007. And that same in Blackbird chromite deposit in 2008. So yeah, like Matt was saying, this whole area has been kind of tossed on the back burner, having been wrought with like obviously access issues and First Nation issues, and
the infrastructure challenges.
Are extraordinary.
Severe.
So and that's something that I'm going to cover in the article this week. So I'm not going to jump into that now, but do have a read in the article and see what is going on in terms of those angles. But in terms of the geology, like all these deposits that have been found over the past decade follow along like this arc-shaped magnetic high, which kind of stands out in geophysical surveys.
Okay.
And it spans like 60 kilometers in diameter, thus the name Ring of Fire.
Ring of Fire.
Like a horseshoe shape.
Yeah.
So the high actually follows like a mantle-derived ultramafic intrusion. And that's been kind of like in place along the margin of this giant granitic Pluton. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I say ultramafic, I really it's like this jargony term geologists use. Well, it's not. It's a science term. It's like scientific term.
Yeah, I see it in press releases all the time.
Okay, so
chasing the ultramafics.
If anybody doesn't have a clue what this means, in geology, we kind of like have a spectrum of igneous rocks that we classify. Ultramafic being like super magnesium rich sort of melts in the crust that require extremely hot temperatures to be melted. And then it goes into mafic, which is what you see in your volcanoes in Hawaii, which is more iron, magnesium rich. And then it goes into intermediate, where you see your granite, well, not your granites, but like intermediate rocks, so more iron, a little bit more silica. And then you get into your granites, and that's called felsic, and that's full of like silica and some iron and all this like sweet stuff.
That explains why it pops on magnetics, right?
Yeah,
with
because
all the iron.
of course, yeah. So like there's going to be some contrast there.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a little like geology sidestep within a geology sidestep. So anyway, so the rocks as a package, of course, belongs to a greenstone belt that we always talk about in Ontario and in Quebec. So you have the Abitibi, you have Red Lake, you have James Bay area, which is different, its own like greenstone belts, which are these old, super old volcanic arcs that formed in the ocean, like seriously, like Indonesia, and then they all just slam together into this melange, which I love talking about because it's so cool. I see this movie play in my head of like the Archean, and Captain Picard and Q is over there in the corner looking at this like world, and it's melted and all these volcanoes spewing. It's anyway rad. You have to be in my head right now. So that was kind of happening. And but at some point, what's really unique about this specific greenstone belt up in the James Bay lowlands is that it happened to have this big iron formation that was deposited, probably in some sort of back arc, like basin sea thing. Okay. And so that's kind of unique for that sort of area. And on top of it too, you had a lot of these ultramafic, that's that spin word again.
There it is.
So you had a lot of those ultramafic rocks that kind of like were coming up through. So you don't normally see that in other greenstone belts where you see more orogenic goldstone.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So,
So do you mind if I just quickly ask?
Yeah, go for it.
What is the deal with the chromite then?
Okay.
Why is it so pervasive, I guess, in that specific area, or if that's the right word, or
this is the question. So this is where that iron formation comes into play, right? So you have all these ultramafic dikes, which are super hot temperature. We're back in the Archean, so back then everything was like crazy hot. So you can reach those temperatures to have ultramafic melts kick around.
Okay.
And so these dikes would like punch up through the crust, and they would like hit these iron formations. And what happens is that these hot melts would gobble up the iron formation, and in doing so, like assimilate all of the sulfur and all the metals and all this like rich goodness stuff. It's kind of like tossing oil into water.
Okay.
Right? So suddenly you have this melt, and it has this completely separate fluid of like sulfur, which is immiscible.
Okay.
And then all these like metals that are kicking around, like chrome and PGEs and you name it, all of a sudden say, oh, look, it's sulfur, man. And they go and like they latch on to the sulfur, and then they form their minerals, and and the minerals are super heavy, and so they precipitate out onto the bottom of the melt. So as temperatures start to cool, you start forming these blankets of chromite, PGEs, et cetera,
Yep. Iron, chromium oxide.
Sure.
Does that sound right? I've always been interested in this because it's something that's very you hear so often in the Ring of Fire about the economics of chromite, which I gather are not particularly great right now.
No, because it's usually used as an alloy in making steel.
Yeah.
So with the Ring of Fire is you had all the chromite deposits up in the Ring of Fire, like the Big Daddy, the Blackbird. Each of them have about 30 million tons of 30 to 40% chromium oxide.
Wow.
Okay, which is actually like elephants in the chromium world. If you were to go to the Bushveld, right, in South Africa, which is like the namesake in the chromium geology sphere.
Yeah.
I mean, they have like 11 billion tons of this stuff, but grades that are similar to what you see at the Ring of Fire, so 30, 40% chromium oxide. So it's quite comparable, and considering that this is such a young district compared to the Bushveld, it is kind of demonstrates that the Ring of Fire is of economic interest, right?
Oh, yeah.
In a bigger scale, too. So that's what formed Big Daddy Blackbird. When we look at Eagle's Nest, it's kind of more similar to, it's a nickel-copper PGE deposit. Okay. So it's kind of similar to Voisey's Bay and Sudbury and some of the other magmatic sulfide deposits that you see around.
In terms of the mineralizing event.
Yeah. So this one is like, it's all part of the same beast, right?
Okay.
But it's a little bit different in a sense such that they're more in feeder zones to these sills. And so they're more of these straight dikes kind of cutting up through.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And they just had a different composition, I guess, in the melt. They didn't really quite hit the iron formation that you normally do see out there in the chromium deposits and stuff. But so the chemistries are going to be a little bit different. And they're still actually trying to figure out, like, where does the nickel and copper come from? Where does the PGEs come from? Where does the chromium come from? And is it all from these iron formations or what? Like, is there a different, deeper source? Because, again, it's still a new district. And they still have to do a lot of work to figure it out.
Many a PhD. And
you know what? They're doing it right now. They've got a lot of people from Laurentian University working on it, and it's in their best interest, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of pretty much the gist of it. Another little quick summary: the Ring of Fire, excellent potential for like magmatic nickel copper PGE deposits, excellent potential for chromium deposits that are comparable to Bushveld in terms of grade, for example. And then you also have opportunity for VMS deposits, which you see elsewhere in the greenstone belts. For example, Kidd Creek in Ontario, or Rouen.
Rouyn-Noranda.
Yeah. And, yeah, I'm sorry. I can't get everything right.
That's fine. That's the beauty of podcasting.
Yeah.
We're going to be wrong sometimes.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's potential for that up there too. Again, there is like some transportation, but there is access issues. There are First Nation discussions and involvements up there, and that kind of like gels into this big story about the Ring of Fire. So check out the article, because I do mention a lot
and
about
you spoke with Noront with
Alan
management?
Coots.
With Alan Coots, yeah. I know.
Yeah,
and
just got off the phone with him. Thanks, Alan. He was so stoked. He's like, it's so amazing talking to someone who likes geology. I'm like, yes, let's keep talking.
Yeah, check out the Geology Corner.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, did you guys get into more of a recent update on the negotiations and the socio-political side? Did he give you kind of a little bit of an update on what's going on up there?
Totally.
Yeah. I think I know this is the Geology Corner, but being the sort of the issues with the Ring of Fire, I think it warrants a little bit of an update, just because it's one of the big issues up there for sure, right?
Well, Noront right now, they're kind of like taking the approach where they have been spending a lot of the past like handful of years consolidating the district into their own main interest. So they basically own all of the deposits that are up there right now. Yep. And I think it's because if you have too many people up there, each company has to talk to each First Nations group, and there's 9 different First Nations impacted in this area. It's super remote. The closest paved road is 300 kilometers away. The nearest community, there's all these like winter roads that connect the different communities nearby.
Okay.
But that's only operable for like 2 months of the year. So what happens is right now is that the Premier of Ontario had sent a mandate letter.
Wynne.
That's right.
Everybody in Ontario's favorite, I think, person right now.
Oh, okay, cool. I don't know if you're being facetious or not. So yeah, she put out a mandate letter to the Minister of Northern Development saying, basically make development in the Ring of Fire your top priority. And get this access or this road construction started by 2018, which dovetails with Noront's plan or basically need to get this road constructed in order to access their Eagle's Nest deposit, which they want to kick off with production by 2021.
Because those aren't small deposits there.
They're big deposits.
They're logistically complicated.
And they're all going to go down like dominoes as soon as you get some sort of infrastructure in there. So right now, Noront has asked the government in a statement to say, okay, well, let's table this. Let's get this down. Let's get the First Nations on. Like, let's figure it out. But then, of course, 2 days later, there was Martin Falls First Nations group came back and said, you know, no one has consulted us. There's obviously some back and forth, some issues there. So it's
the road
convoluted.
issue is in discussion.
It's still in discussion. And when I was talking to Alan about it, he said, well, all the First Nations guys are really excited. And because there's so many of them, nobody really knows how it's just too many cooks in the kitchen, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
If I were to put in my own words, where you have so many people saying we want the road to access our community and our community there and there, and it should look like this. So basically what they're going to do is they want to sit down at the table and align this road and just say, this is the route. This shall be the way. And from there, just start worrying about like financing and everything.
Yeah.
Because it's about $600 million to make
it's not
that first mine. And that's excluding
that's Eagle's Nest.
The road.
Yeah. Which and I'm assuming the chromite stuff is pretty much on the back burner as far as it's more of a strategic position at this point.
Well, they're going to
optionality as everybody.
Yeah, so they're going to start with Eagle's Nest, and then I think they're going to move over to Blackbird.
And are they doing any work at Eagle's Nest? They're
doing some exploration.
Oh, exciting. To look for potential resource expansion and stuff like that? Or?
Yeah, to be totally honest, I actually didn't really talk to him about it.
No, I mean, when you're talking about the Ring of Fire, it ends up...
just talking about heaps of stuff.
About geology and social issues.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the big story there.
Yeah, well, that's
but they're
great.
Keeping active, and they're really optimistic, and he sounds like a really switched on guy. I really loved my conversation with him. And it's neat to see, and I'm sure it'll all get resolved. It's just a matter of, getting everyone at the table and say, okay, well, guys, how are we going to figure this out, right? Yeah,
no, for sure. And it's a situation we, as a news team, will continue to follow closely because it's very topical, especially for our friends in Ontario. So where our head office is located. So, so that has been our little. Well, I wouldn't even say it was intro. It was a fairly in-depth discussion on the Ring of Fire. So
I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it was great. I thought I'm leaving.
Did you know it?
Oh, I knew a bit. I knew more about the social side because I've covered a lot of that before. But I wanted to ask you about chromite and some of the iron formation stuff. So that was awesome. So once again, this has been
Geology Corner
with Lesley Stokes.
Yay! So awesome.
Yeah. And that's why I love the Geology Corner. We get to talk about some really awesome stuff, including a lot of really good geology and science-related material, but we get to relate that through to the socioeconomic, the political, etc. with these regions. And the Ring of Fire is definitively all those things. So it's really interesting to have those sort of deep digs on some of these jurisdictions and mineral belts, which is fun. I do enjoy it. And once again, I'd like to remind everyone that this podcast is brought to you by the Yukon Mining Alliance. Please do surf by the Yukon Mining Alliance website and check out all the exciting exploration and mining activity going on in the territory. And for this week, a quick update. I just wanted to give a shout out to the employees who are recently, as the Capstone's Minto Mine has been winding down, and they concluded open pit operations in late September. So there's some long tenured employees and people who'd worked on the project who are pretty much wrapping up their time there. And I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody. It is sad to see one of the longer standing Western Canadian copper open pit copper operations winding down. As we know, Capstone had announced previously that the open pit would be winding up around this time, and then the underground portion of the operation will be winding up next year. So it's just we always talk, like, where's the next hard rock mine in the Yukon? As we know, the Wolverine zinc mine is currently on care and maintenance, hypothetically, for the foreseeable future. And then we are going to be losing Minto, probably, unless we see a significant uptick in copper prices over the near term. But as always, we're well aware of there's a lot of opportunity in the Yukon for someone to emerge, a company to emerge as the next hard rock mine. We know Victoria Gold is fully permitted at their Dublin Gulch property. We know that Western Copper and Gold and their casino project is currently moving through permitting. That could be the next open pit copper mine, or gold mine, depending on where metal prices are. The payable metal there could shift a little bit depending on metal prices. And so that pretty much concludes our show for the week. As always, please do surf by northernminer.com. Check out our website. Give the subscription section a gander. It is a screaming deal, as I always say, to get a lot of really great insights on the industry. You also get access to our Canadian Mines Handbook, which is a exhaustive, pretty much encyclopedia of mineral properties. It's a really great value add. I'd use it all the time as far as writing our stories are concerned. But also, please do give us a strong vote on iTunes. Surf by our YouTube channel and check us out on Twitter, because we are going digital. And this has been the Northern Miner Podcast with Matthew Keeble. Thanks again, and we will talk to you next week.